Hey everyone, welcome to Arcadeology, a podcast focused on video game history and design. My name is Kevin, and today we are speaking with video game trailer editor M. Joshua Cauller, who has edited trailers for games such as That Dragon Cancer and Darkest Dungeon. Before we get to that, some announcements. First, my next history video will be on the history of StarCraft. I'm currently editing the script and will be sending that into production soon. I'm also working on my first game design deep dive on RPG mechanics. Finally, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice and leave a rating. It would mean so much to me. Clever 5-star reviews will be read aloud on the podcast. And now, without further ado, let's talk to Josh. Tell me, how did you get into editing game trailers?
Okay, so the most obvious starting point would probably be That Dragon Cancer. That Dragon Cancer was kind of like the ballooning portfolio piece that I did as far as game trailers goes. Right. And to really understand how I got into that, it kind of comes back to faith, belief, and how those aspects inform games, which is to say pretty rarely. And it's not usually a component that's discussed or explored. And so I noticed back in 2012, Journey came out, and I played that, and of course for everyone it was like a transformative experience, and so many things that people say about Journey. But there was this one element of the game, and people talk about the pilgrimage and the other people that they meet, and all that. I was like, wait, this game invites people to have kind of a religious experience. There's your input as a spiritually oriented being was relevant. So I was like, all right, I'm going to see where this rabbit hole goes, because I always wanted to make a game myself, but it took me a very long time to realize I didn't actually want to make games. I just wanted to have made games. Right.
Yeah, I know what that's like.
And but yeah, as soon as I finished Journey, I was like, all right, I have to find out who else is exploring this avenue, who else is like really taking this seriously, and it stopped being a pipe dream concept all the way down there, and I was like, all right, let's see what's real. And so I started finding other people who were writing about games, not in like this really gross religious way, which a lot of people do, but in a thoughtful, engaged, and honoring way that really engaged with game developers. And that's when I found Game Church, which I've written with for and around for at least 5 years. And I've since disconnected, but the formation of that community and website was really kind of what blossomed me into thinking about games on a larger and more diverse spectrum. And so that ultimately led me to, sorry, I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but that's what led me to writing, like really being curious and just going out and finding everything that's like these weird, wild, creative games. And so back in 2013, I think, when That Dragon Cancer went public as a concept of a game, or I could be wrong, but like they were just trying to like get funding and make something to announce the game. And that's when I found Ryan and Amy Green, who were making this game, and I just started talking to them and finding other people who were doing that sort of thing. And so fast forward to 2015. So I've only been making game trailers for 3 years now, officially for 3 years. And it's just been like so all consuming and exciting that like it's worked out well for me and my family that I've been able to make it my full-time gig. Which is to say, it's probably a bad idea to say, hey, I'm going to start a new business and just jump full-time into it.
Right.
But all that to say that like it was game journalism. It was my 12, 13, 14, however many years I've been doing marketing, video production, websites, all those things. Yeah. So similar to you, I also went to an art school. I went to what became an art institute school, but a school back in central Pennsylvania called York. What was it called? Bradley Academy is what my college was called. What was it called? So Bradley Academy, I went there because yeah, I didn't really see any other option when it came to school. Like I was just kind of like, I need to create something. I don't know. I don't want to go to school for anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all I liked to do, the only things that I resonated with in high school were making really weird videos. So I was like, all right, maybe I might as well try to see if I can make money doing this.
Sure.
And eventually it led to that and a million different kinds of disappointments and pitfalls and small achievements and back and forth. And then when I found myself unemployed again, I was like, all right, what do I really want to do? And I was like, I really want to make trailers. And all the connections just kind of came together of the relationships with other developers that had formed over time, writing for Game Church, and here we are. I would say that like the trend that I find throughout the whole thread, and somewhere in the middle of that, I met Jason Vandenberg from Ubisoft, the For Honor guy. He was lecturing in Harrisburg and just talking to high school students about how to get into making video games, and his talk was essentially about how to not and why you shouldn't, and and it was the best talk that I think that I'd ever heard, because I was like, yeah, I really don't want to make video games, do I? No, I do, but I don't, and coming to terms with that was actually what got me to the point where I was like, all right, I need to start small.
Right.
And I think that that's the key for anybody who wants to create or make anything in this industry, is that you think that your big ideas are going to be what gets you there.
Right.
And they're actually what's holding you back. And it's when you are able to take these big, massive things and distill them down to that one single little tiny mechanic with the ugly graphics and or maybe you don't even get there. Maybe you just where I was and just writing stories in your spare time, and they're really crappy and terrible and meta, but not going anywhere. Right. And then eventually, whoa, it makes sense. And suddenly you're like, make it shorter and smaller, and it resonates with one person, and that's enough to get you to your next step.
That's awesome. And I feel like your story actually, it's very much in line with some of my previous guests. Like Adam Dolan, for example, who worked on God of War, it was just a long time of, he had his goals, but he wasn't going to be able to get there. He wasn't going to go straight to the top of the mountain. Right? Oh no. And it was absolutely. It was basically just keeping at it, and the proximity, being around the people that you want to work with in the future is eventually what helped out. And I hear that, when you talk about your network connections, were kind of what allowed you to transition into doing what you are doing now. You went out, you met some people, you were
wholly and entirely.
You were there, and that helps a lot, just being there to talk to people.
And that's entirely what it is. Like the thing that I hate and absolutely adore about the game industry is that it's entirely about relationships and networking. Right. And I'd say that the part that I hate is just the fact that I have to get out of my house. You get me on the line like right now, and I'm like, I come alive and I'm full of energy. But as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to be like, ugh, mush, because human interaction, I love it, and it drains the crap out of me.
Right. You enjoy it while you can do it, but it's only for so long.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get energized by this, but I get energized while it's happening, but I lose all my energy as soon as it's done.
No, I totally understand. I'm very much the same way. Getting into the nitty gritty of editing these game trailers. So how much direction do you take from the game dev versus how much is your own input and creative juice?
So one of the first people that I made a trailer for was a guy named Thomas Henschel. He's making a game called Archmage Rises, which is so ambitious that we made a trailer for it 3 years ago, and I don't know when it's going to be out. Fantastic, brilliant simulation of mageness that's trying to be something like meta over what RPGs are. Anyway, that's one of the things that he said was whenever he was kind of like my business mentor, helping me to get this thing up started. And his advice was whenever you make a new business contact, walk into the room, pick up the felt tip pen the dry erase marker, and just start drawing on their board. If you can. Right. Don't be a dick. Just start, and don't draw dicks. That's a bad idea too. But draw whatever is relevant directing. And because a lot of the time, the ultimate thing that people need when it comes to business, creativity, and all those things is they just need someone to be a soundboard. Most of the time, it's entirely about being a soundboard. So I could be completely wrong, going in the wrong direction in every way, and then someone comes back to me and says, actually, that's not what we're looking for. And that's actually a good thing, because then we know in the grand scheme of things where we're not going. We ruled something out. And that helped us to gain orientation to what we're going to be going towards. To give an example, I was most recently working on the Darkest Dungeon trailer, which the original Darkest Dungeons trailers were something I really, really looked up to because they were done by Marlon Weeb, who does amazing work. But Marlon has, I believe, since been acquired by the Crypt of the Necrodancer team. Forgetting their studio name at the moment, but he Brace Yourself Games. Yes, so he's with Brace Yourself Games, and so that opened up a window for me to step in and pick up where he left off with a trailer. And so Chris Barassa is this amazing creative director for Red Hook Games for Darkest Dungeon, and he knows exactly what he wants when you give him something to soundboard off of. And so that was kind of what our relationship was. I'm like, all right, this is what we want to do with the trailer. And he came back to me and said, all right, well, actually, how about we add some flashes here, some lens blur, and actually this glow that we're using on this particular element over here, that looks, a little bit JV. So let me go back to the art table and elaborate on it. Right. And that's kind of the working relationship that I'd say is a little bit more when you are working directly with a creative director who's really established. Right. More often than not, I'm coming in as the creative, a little bit more of the creative director, which is super weird when I don't know the game as well as the developer does. Right. And so a lot of it is me just trying to learn on the field as quickly as possible. I'm the kind of person, I love asking way too many questions. People who hang out with me usually get overwhelmed with the amount of questions. I would love to say that that's from my game journalism background, but when I was a game journalist, I was mostly an introvert who just played a game and wrote about it, so I didn't actually ask people all the questions. But the truth is, like, to get to know someone, you just got to ask a lot of questions, and so that's what it really comes down to.
It's interesting because I looked at the Darkest Dungeon trailer, and obviously you had to play around with game assets kind of on a different layer, because I noticed I was just watching it before I talked to you, so there's like some layering
with the Cauller Madness trailer.
So how often is the game dev willing to just like say, oh yeah, here's these files to play with,
here's all of my assets, do whatever you want with them, have a great time. Honestly, it's weird because I've worked with some really obscure developers and some really famous ones, and I don't think that people have ever been like, no, you can't have these art assets. But I'd say that those who are far more established are like, yeah, sure, whatever you want. Right. Here's everything. Right. And that's actually really fun to play with. But I'd say that with the Color of Madness Darkest Dungeon trailer, the main thing that it came down to was, all right, I'm going to throw all these art assets that you've provided, because it was at least 10 times what you saw in the trailer. And here's what I think is going to go here. Here's what we go here. And I mean, that's really what the editors, what I'm doing most of the time, is saying, here's 10 times the amount of what we're ultimately going to be seeing at least. And how do we trim that down to the bare minimum? Right. The weirdest thing about being a trailer editor is that it causes me to be very cut happy. And what I mean by that is, like, I just want to cut everything. I just want to delete everything, all the buts, ums, subconsciously speaking. Right. Anything that gives you a chance to breathe, I want to have control over those moments. And that gets really didactic when you're dealing with a 30-plus hour RPG. Right. But that's sort of the fun of it, is trying to figure out the shortcuts to really get down to how do we take this 30-hour RPG and turn it into 43 seconds. Right. How do you boil it down into the essence of what the game is really going for? Yeah, and so I would encourage anybody who's listening to this who's a writer or a remotely creative person in any way, shape, or form, get really comfortable with shitty first drafts, because everything that comes down to what you are thinking in your mind things are going to be in the end, which is the perfect, the absolute astounding, beautiful masterpiece. You got to get through that shitty draft first, and you just got to make things really, really, really terrible, and it's going to be dumb and stupid, and your client, you would think, would not like it at all, but that's how you start the conversation. And it's only after you get all these really crappy, rough ideas down on paper, throw it out there, that you can start paring everything back, and that you can start honing things in. Because if you're trying to get everything perfect the first time, you're going to be paralyzed.
Right.
And I get paralyzed when I have like a million things, and I'm like, I get overwhelmed too. So
yeah, no, totally.
It's just trying to get out of that overwhelmed state and just getting anything down on paper.
Yeah, and there's actually, you've probably heard, there's that really good Ira Glass quote.
Yep,
where
that's what I was implying.
He talks about the gap between your own talent and your taste. You want to be creative because you have taste, but you don't necessarily have the talent to start with. You got to get used to, closing the gap. And
by just making a lot of work.
And when I would do a lot of screenwriting back in grad school. One of the things that I always talked about the first draft, I used to refer to the first draft as a vomit draft. Basically, it was it's just everything. It's on paper, and it's not very pretty to look at, but it's all the thoughts I have for this particular story are now on paper. Now I can refine them.
Absolutely, exactly right. Yeah, and that's entirely The biggest enemy of creativity is your own desire to be a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is simply just getting anything out there at all in any way is progress.
Yeah. So you mentioned the original Darkest Dungeon trailer as being a bit of an inspiration. Are there any other trailers out there that really inspire your work or motivate you to keep going?
Actually, I'd say that most trailers just like zap me of creative energy.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is not like I absolutely love trailers. Like I would just spend all my time watching trailers if you just put them in front of me. But and they're my absolute favorite part of going to the movies and stuff like that.
Right.
Or E3 or whatever. Like I don't even care. Like I don't care for cinematics versus gameplay trailers. But my attitude with trailers is. When it comes to what's the most inspiring to me, my personal flavor, voice, whatever, when it comes to trailers is actually bridging the gap between player and developer. So like the developer tends to, because the way that games are made, they have to be focused on features and kind of this layer and that layer and these pieces all coming together.
Right.
Whereas they're not thinking about like, all right, so what does my mom think about this when she has it in her hands and can actually play the game? Like no one necessarily thinks about the lowest common denominator of player in the process of what the experience is actually like, because usually that's really unhelpful when it comes to getting the experience across. But what I personally am under the assumption of, and how my assumption going into making game trailers was that the game trailers need to be as close to the player as possible. And when I started, it was still kind of like in the beginning of the boom of Twitch streamers and people who are really kind of testimonially playing through game experiences. And I had my assumptions about how that worked and why it didn't work or whatever. And I'm constantly being proven wrong in everything. So that's kind of my assumption in everything that I do is I'm probably wrong.
Right.
But the main thing, my main takeaway was realizing that there are connections. The closer that we get to what the player experience is actually like, that if you can somehow bridge that literacy gap, whether you have really complicated and convoluted mechanics or whatever is the emotional layer underlying motivating the player. What does people really feel on the inside of their chest cavity that makes them respond to things? And that's been kind of what inspires me more, is the connection with people, not as much just the finished outputs. Because I mean, if all I do is sit around and watch trailers, all I'm doing is sitting and watching polished, masterful pieces.
Right.
When I don't actually see what blood, sweat, and tears are going into things.
True.
And that's actually more motivating and inspiring to me, is when I see complete garbage. that leads to the crystalline diamonds. That's what's really inspiring to me.
Cool.
Sidebar. Playing off of that, so the new No Man's Sky trailer just went up today, and it's all about the multiplayer. Blah 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 blah. The thing that psyched me up beyond no belief about this trailer is that they have some shoddy camera work in there. And what I mean by that is, like, there's a couple points where the ship takes off, and as it's flying through the woods, you can tell that the player is leaning a little too closely to the trees and isn't doing a great job piloting. Right. And there's a point where the player character is turning just a little bit, and the camera looks a little tiny bit shaky. Those are the moments to me that are saying, like, humbly, transparently, this is actual. Not only is this actual players, this is actual gameplay. We're not trying to be super polished. You're not trying to be super amazing. We're just trying to convey what things are actually like.
Right. And that's actually and that's super important for them in their particular instance, because their
early trailers were so incredibly polished.
Were very polished. They were very staged and scripted, and even if it was in gameplay footage, they had triggers that were scripting certain events to happen as they played through, and it's very important for them at this point, if they want to keep basically drawing people slowly back in,
bring people back,
to bring people back after it was a disaster. Their launch was a disaster. Whether no matter what your opinion of the game was, no matter, I guess I had certain sympathy for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, this did not go well for you guys.
Yeah. I lucked out. I played the game for the first time last month. So I felt like that was the right way to go about it. Get it $15 used, and and now I'm getting a brand new free update. So it feels like
why not?
It's like it's a regular indie game. Come on.
It's a regular indie game. It's not a whatever it was, a $60
a $60 retail copy. Yeah,
exactly. So. As we close it out, I was wondering, what are 5 years from now?
Sure.
What are your goals and ambitions with trailers? Where do you see yourself going with them?
So for me, like I said, I always got into this because I really, really wanted to make video games. Like initially, that's what I thought that I wanted to do. And to be completely transparent, I don't know that that's gone away entirely.
Sure.
And the more that I work and the more that I network, the more that I'm going to kind of just accidentally have a back pocket full of trailer or game making skills.
Right.
Relationships where if suddenly someone said, "Hey, let's collaborate on this," and we made a, game jam style prototype on something, it would just kind of snowball from there.
Right.
I know that's only, the first 90% of game development is 10%, and then the last 10% is the last 90, meaning like you think you're almost done, and then it's actually the second half.
Right.
Or far more than that, just finishing the product. But the games, I have some really ridiculous game concepts that are really, really, really exciting to me, and I would love to share because no one is ever going to copy these ideas. I don't even care. Like, honestly, like the one thing that really, really excited me. So we just found out that we're pregnant with our second baby.
Oh, congratulations.
And I'm really, really excited about that. For both times that we've gone through this parental process, we went to a midwife. And I've learned that these midwives are these amazing, powerfully smart and capable women who are way more brave than probably most professions out there. And so I would adore the opportunity to make a game about midwifery.
All right. Why not?
They would require a lot of very uncomfortable research, and in more ways than one.
Right.
But the reason why I knew that games aren't that far away from this concept is because I was recently playing a game called Pillars of the Earth.
Okay.
Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is just I thought that it was going to be a narrative, visual novel style game, but it's a lot more elaborate than that, and much more of a point and click adventure.
Right.
And within the first half hour of the game, I was explaining the concept of awe through cathedral architecture to my character's children, and also in the midst of that process, delivering this character's third child in a really, really messy circumstance. yeah, you didn't get into the mechanics of childbirth and that sort of thing, but the thing about games is that they're so oriented around the topic of life and death.
Right.
But they very rarely actually get into very few of any resources out there actually get into the for lack of a better term, mechanics of new life.
Right. Yeah.
And so and it's very uncomfortable of a subject.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why people are uncomfortable with all those things. So anyway,
yeah,
all that say,
I totally understand. I mean, there's kind of, and it's on both ends of the spectrum, right? Because there's certain, I know there's people out there, it's called death positive, where they're trying to be like, we can't just have death as this thing that people fear. We have to, acknowledge that as a natural part of life and all that. And they're trying to destigmatize the idea of death. And I believe there's
something that you can't talk about or that you can't engage with the subject of. Right, exactly.
So I can imagine that on both ends of the spectrum that this, the mechanics of early development and the mechanics of death, they're both out there and untapped conversations to be had. Yeah.
So what's more scary? There's actually something fascinating that I found through one of my nurse friends. She said that within her medical profession, they would rather fight. Every nurse, every medical practitioner she knows would rather spend like 10 minutes trying to bring back a dead person than trying to be there for a birth.
Right.
And the reason why is there's far more on the line of what is or is not.
Right.
It seems like, at least within the medical profession, when it comes to birth. So anyway, this is a weird and foreign concept, but these are the sorts of things that like are really exciting to me.
Yeah, you want to explore them.
And so like that and the subject of faith and belief, I feel like there's nothing that's quite more despairing and unpleasant of an idea than a Bible video game. But I mean, honestly, yeah. There's like I've played a ton of them, and I love the idea, but they so often forget to get into the tensions of like, what are the actual tensions of the characters in the story, or what are the actual questions that the heroes, for lack of a better term, are actually going through. And so anyway, these are all the kinds of game mechanics and subjects and themes that I love to explore far more. And there's a lot of people who are out there or there's a few developers out there who I think that are really doing some clever and amazing things on that thread. One of my favorite, I'm just going to give a shout out because one of my favorite game developers out there is Jay Tholen and what he did with Dropsy, Dropsy the Clown, which seems like it's a game about a creepy clown, but it's actually about what it's like to try to love people in a sincere way.
Oh.
Anyway, so that's kind of like those are the possibilities, but ultimately I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to stop making trailers. To fully answer your question, I don't know that I'm going to be able to, because I love making trailers. I love short time frames. I love, I mean, it typically takes me like four weeks to make a trailer. So about a month to make a trailer. And that's probably a long time for what people would think it would cost or take in terms of time. But that's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things.
No, it's not.
And when it comes to actually making a game typically takes at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And a lot more resources.
Right, exactly.
So I would love to, I probably am going to be making trailers for a good while, but I would love to be able to make some really, really weird stuff that makes people uncomfortable.
That's awesome. So Josh, where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, so just find me at mjoshua on Twitter or mjoshua.com.
Cool. All right, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. Your patronage means the world to me. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode, and until then, follow me on Twitter at @TheArcadeologist. Take care, everyone.